Okay, let's jump right in and travel back to a televised event that absolutely shocked the tech world and, honestly, redefined the future of global labor. I mean, we are looking at a modern industrial miracle right now, or, depending on how you look at it, a massive industrial warning. Welcome to this explainer, where today we're unpacking China's lightning-fast takeover of the global humanoid robot industry.
To really understand this, you have to picture this staggering one-year transformation. On New Year's Eve in 2025, during the massive Spring Festival Gala broadcast, Unit Tree's founder, Wang Shengxing, put his newest robots on stage for a choreographed dance, and, well, it didn't go great. Audiences basically saw these clunky, awkward machines. They were mocked relentlessly online, with people comparing them to toddlers just learning how to walk. It was a pretty huge embarrassment, but instead of arguing, the team just went completely silent and got to work. Exactly 1 year later, at the 2026 gala, they came back, and the limping? Totally gone. The robots were executing flawless martial arts, perfect balance, high kicks. I mean, it left the entire world completely stunned. And that single year of obsessive silent iteration allowed China to completely dominate what's projected to be a $5 trillion market. Get this. In 2025 alone, out of the roughly 13,000 humanoid robots produced globally, China shipped 90% of them. 90%! They didn't just enter the race, they absolutely lapped the competition. Giants in the US and Japan essentially had to step back and just watch as Chinese domestic manufacturing swallowed the market whole.
And the crazy part? The momentum isn't slowing down. It's actually accelerating. Financial institutions like Morgan Stanley are now projecting that an astonishing 28,000 humanoid robots could hit the Chinese market in 2026 alone. So we're not just in a prototype phase anymore. This is full-blown mass market deployment happening literally right before our eyes.
So how do they do it? Let's get into the blueprint, specifically China's 2023 master plan. You see, you don't just accidentally capture 90% of a cutting-edge global market. This was a highly calculated top-down government strategy. While the rest of the world was totally distracted by the AI chatbot craze and semiconductor wars back in 2023, China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology quietly signed a landmark action plan. They officially elevated humanoid robots to the exact same strategic importance as AI and semiconductors. They set some seriously aggressive targets too: master the core components by 2025 and lead the entire global supply chain by 2027. And they didn't do this just to show off. This was a direct survival strategy. So China is facing a really severe demographic crisis right now, an aging population and a shrinking workforce. To maintain their title as the world's factory, they desperately needed a new kind of worker. So they targeted 10 key sectors, ranging from basic manufacturing to high-stakes healthcare and rescue operations. To kickstart this, the government started pumping massive subsidies into research hubs in cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Hangzhou. They essentially forced an entire industry to bloom overnight. Which brings us to their actual engineering strategy: lab perfection versus real-world iteration. This is where you see a completely different approach to innovation. If you look at legends like Japan's Osama or America's Boston Dynamics, their philosophy is all about lab perfection. They'll spend years, sometimes decades, meticulously perfecting every single joint and software protocol in a highly controlled environment before the public ever sees it. Chinese startups, they took a totally different route. They adopted this somewhat messy but incredibly rapid strategy of real-world iteration. Basically, build it, launch it, break it, and fix it on the fly. Here's how that loop actually works in practice. The government actively encouraged companies to deploy their imperfect, buggy robots straight into active factories in places like Shenzhen. And because they were out in the real world, they instantly started gathering massive amounts of operational data, stuff you could never simulate in a lab. Startups use this real-world feedback to fix bugs, optimize algorithms, and upgrade hardware at a speed that Western competitors simply couldn't keep up with. They literally used the real world as their laboratory. But speed is just one piece of the puzzle. Let's look at the price war and how they built the ultimate ecosystem. To truly grasp this takeover, we have to look at the ruthless economics at play here. Thanks to decades of manufacturing dominance, China has built a fully domestic, incredibly collaborative ecosystem. If a robotics startup needs a high-power motor or a LiDAR sensor, they don't have to wait months for an international shipment. They just call a factory down the street. It's an amazing plug-and-play environment where talent, testing labs, and parts are shared. Plus, these companies are perfectly willing to absorb massive initial financial losses. Why? Because the ultimate goal is to capture the market share and lock in the global technical standards before the rest of the world even realizes the race has started. And because of this highly subsidized, hyper-efficient ecosystem, Chinese manufacturers are driving the cost of a humanoid robot down to staggering lows. We are talking about getting the price tag under $30,000. That's roughly the price of a mid-range car. At that price point, outfitting a factory with humanoid robots isn't some sci-fi fantasy for billionaires anymore. It becomes a completely feasible, everyday business expense for small and medium manufacturers.
And this massive shift brings us to the global fallout, specifically regarding jobs and warfare.
This kind of sudden, radical affordability is a profound shift. When the tools of production change this drastically, the entire world order shifts with it. Professor Trung Nguyen Tonk really hits the nail on the head here, pointing out that this poses an existential threat to developing nations. For decades, the primary economic engine for many poorer countries has been offering cheap human labor to attract large international corporations. But that entire model, it's about to be violently disrupted.
Seriously, think about the harsh economic reality for a second. When a massive corporation can buy a tireless machine that works 24 hours a day, never goes on strike, never needs a bathroom break, and never asks for a raise, all for the price of a used car, why would they ever deal with human labor supply chains again? The global labor structure is going to fundamentally and permanently change, which could trigger large-scale employment crises in nations that rely heavily on factory work.
And beyond the factory floor, there's a much darker application. Experts like Professor Hans Luing from the Swedish Defense University are sounding the alarm that these incredibly agile machines will inevitably find their way into military and defense applications. I mean, if a robot can execute flawless martial arts and balance perfectly on a stage, it can easily navigate a chaotic battlefield, carry supplies, or even bear arms. The transition from an industrial worker to a military asset feels practically guaranteed at this point.
But hold on, because there's a twist. Are we actually looking at an imminent tech bubble?
Behind this facade of absolute dominance, there are some pretty glaring cracks. Right now, there are over 150 different companies aggressively crowding into the Chinese humanoid robot space. It is an absolute gold rush. In fact, this density is far worse and way more chaotic than the infamous electric vehicle boom that previously rocked their economy. When you have that many players fighting for the exact same piece of the pie, chaos is inevitable. This creates a highly dangerous tech bubble fueled almost entirely by an illusion of success. Remember those government subsidies we talked about? The entire sector is heavily reliant on them. If Beijing decides to turn off that funding tap, hundreds of these companies will just instantly collapse into bankruptcy. We could realistically see a scenario where millions of premature, poorly built robots, pushed to market prioritizing short-term quantity over quality, just break down, creating a massive, toxic wasteland of rapid e-waste.
And perhaps their biggest, most glaring vulnerability lies in the very brains of these machines. While China has completely mastered the physical body of the robot, the frames, the cheap motors, the mass-produced shells, their AI systems are still lagging significantly behind competitors in the US. Without cutting-edge AI to autonomously process complex, unpredictable real-world environments, these robots risk just being big, clumsy metal shells. Sure, they look great doing a highly choreographed dance, but can they truly think on their feet in a dynamic environment?
So where does this leave us? We are undeniably watching a masterclass in rapid manufacturing and market dominance. But the story is far from over. Are we witnessing the unstoppable dawn of a new global powerhouse that's going to reshape human labor forever? Or is this just the reckless buildup to a spectacular metallic crash? It's a huge question. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next one.